is Janice Hall, and I'm a senior consultant with the Avoca Group. I am sharing with you leading practices for provider qualification. I have over 25 years of experience in the industry working for a small biotech, a large CRO, big pharma, and for the last 7 years working with the Avoca Group. I have been on the requesting end and the receiving end of requests for provider qualification. I have established SOPs and tools and led a group that supported clinical teams for provider qualification. At Avoca, I lead the Provider Qualification Leadership Advisory Board to establish leading practices for qualifying clinical service providers. As many of us know, health authorities are increasingly interested in the identification, selection, and oversight of clinical service providers that are used by sponsors and CROs in the conduct of clinical trials. This can be seen in their questions during inspections. In my experience, during inspections, health authorities usually ask for a list of providers that were used to support the clinical trial and what services were transferred to them. They ask for provider contracts to see how well expectations are established in writing. They ask for related SOPs and ask what was done to qualify providers. In some cases, they looked at the approved provider lists. They also ask for documentation on what was done to qualify specific providers. We would provide high-level summary reports, which were signed and dated by key decision makers in our organization. Health authorities would ask who performed these activities, and then they would interview me and others. The documented details behind the summary reports are helpful to prepare for these interviews. So how should you approach conducting an effective qualification of your providers? Well, the Avoca Group addresses these challenges through 3 approaches that include the use of the AQC or Avoca Quality Consortium leading practices, through Avoca Consulting and Research Services, and through the Avoca Diligent platform for provider qualification. I will share with you how these approaches support these challenges. The Avoca Quality Consortium has over 80 leading practices, standards, and tools for provider qualification for over 20 different clinical services and technologies. Sponsors and CROs should have an established process via SOPs and detailed work instructions on how to do this. AQC and MHRA suggest that sponsors conduct a risk evaluation of providers to drive the qualification process. Sponsors and CROs should track the providers that are used and the qualification history of those providers. Sponsors and CROs should establish selection criteria based on standards that align to regulatory expectations and use a request for information or RFI questionnaire that align to those standards to gather provider information. Once you collect provider responses to the RFI questions, subject matter experts can score those responses to identify areas of risk. Next steps often include virtual and face-to-face meetings. For higher risk providers, on-site visits should be conducted to verify that requirements are met. Once final decisions are made, the process should be summarized in a concise report, which can be made available to health authorities during inspections. AQC offers leading practices to support all of these steps. Also, Avoca supports individual client needs through our consulting and research services. We do that to evaluate internal processes and documentation to understand a client's current state and to identify any gaps between the current state and leading practices. And then we also map and implement a path forward, working with client stakeholders within their existing infrastructure to close those gaps. Avoca has supported many consulting initiatives to perform these gap assessments, as well as implementation in crafting custom leading practice SOPs and tools. And lastly, Avoca supports these challenges via the Diligent platform. In the industry, the repeated cycle of receiving and responding to sponsors' RFI questionnaires is duplicated many times over. Performing virtual and on-site qualification assessments is a huge resource and cost burden for many providers. It's also costly to sponsors. They need to define technical standards and selection criteria. They need to prepare and collect RFI responses to their questions and conduct virtual and on-site assessments. Avoca built the Diligent platform to drive significant efficiencies to change this dysfunctional process. Diligent houses the AQC standards and RFI templates in a central platform. Providers complete the RFIs in the platform and can grant permission to sponsors or CROs to extract their completed RFIs. There are nearly 200 completed RFIs in the platform today. Diligent also helps multiple sponsors or CROs to leverage virtual and on-site qualification assessments to avoid duplication. This saves an incredible amount of time for sponsors, CROs, and providers. These assessments are based on established AQC peer-reviewed standards, so they're comprehensive and map to regulations. So in summary, provider qualification is a very important step in driving and managing the quality of clinical trials. These activities, if done in a systematic and well-documented way, can be leveraged across many trials. Through the AQC's leading practices, Avoca's consulting and research services, and the Diligent platform, organizations can illustrate to health authorities that they have solid processes in place to ensure quality while engaging with these very important provider partners. We hope this session will help you and qualifying providers to drive quality for your clinical trials. Thank you for your interest in this topic.